if I had success earlier on, if I had, you know, been on this wave of a bunch of people getting signed and moving up the ladder, or been on the next one, or been on the one before those two, or whatever, I don't even know if I'd be here to talk to you right now, to be perfectly honest. I don't think I could have handled it. I don't think I could have, you know, I don't think I would have survived it, because I wasn't ready, and that's why I didn't get to work. 'Cause our dreams may come true. Let's take a chance on love that is new, one that won't leave us foolish and blue.
Alan Thompson, my man, I'm so excited to have you on this, and I've been thinking about you for months and wanted to make this happen, so I'm glad it is.
Oh man, thanks. And vice versa. I'm a big fan, and I've every time a new one comes out, I'm like, I've got to get on top of getting something to promote so that I can ask Korby if I can do this. Yeah.
Well, here we are. Here it is happening. And let's see. By way of introduction, I would say, like, to me, there's not too many people in East Nashville that is more loved and kind of universally known and is widely regarded as, I read it in an interview, not a yes man, but like you have yes to spare. And you're a man of action. You make shit happen, whether it's with Lady Couch or the Last Waltz tribute that's coming right up, or probably will have just happened when this airs.
Right.
And I just thought, well, maybe we could talk a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but maybe we could start with why East Nashville. You know, how did you get here, and why did you stay?
I moved to Nashville in 2007, and I lived over in Berry Hill and bartended and managed at PM over in Belmont, and I was there.
Used to have the best outdoor patio.
Oh,
and
my
then
God.
when Arnold did that little year-round enclosure, it just ruined it.
Well, it's because of the flies. People would go bonkers, and they'd be like, "How do you get rid of these?" And I'm like, "You go inside." Yeah. Like you're outdoors in the South with, you know,
that's from Nashville. The outdoor patio,
sushi and ice cream and stuff. Like,
what do you think is gonna happen?
You're gonna get them,
guys.
You know. But so the first 3 years I was in town. I lived there with my ex-wife, girlfriend at the time, and we had moved down here from Richmond, Virginia, and there was a bunch of neighborhoods in Richmond that really had a lot of the same qualities as Little Hollywood and Five Points and Inglewood did, especially back then. You know, there's like the formerly working class neighborhoods, or still kind of working class neighborhoods, had become like the artist enclaves, you know, very much like the Haight or Laurel Canyon in the 60s kind of thing. And so when we were beginning to get priced out of Berry Hill, we sort of immediately kind of came over here to start looking for a place to live. And we found a place on Mansfield, right behind the high school, right across from where like Dino's and all of that is. And I remember, like, the place was huge. It was like this old Tudor mansion that had been like converted into a duplex, and the rent on the advertisement was like $850, and which didn't even seem exorbitant for 2010, you know. And
no.
Yeah, and I just remember the landlady was like, kept trying to reassure us that the neighborhood was okay and that it was safe here and all of that. And Colleen and I were just like staring at her because we were like, this is fine. This place seems great. And all the stuff we want to go to is right there, And so we didn't really say anything. And then she was like, do you guys have a lawnmower? And I was like, yeah. She was like, well, your first one's probably going to get stolen. But if you mow the yard, and it did. But if you mow the yard, I'll knock another $100 off the monthly rent. And I'm like, so $700 a month for this giant house? Like, great. I'm sold. And then when we split up, that's when like Terry Rickards and Alex Caress moved in, and then like Lowry Yometz, and it just became sort of the 5 Points frat house there for a little while, and the rent never got raised until I moved out in like 2015.
So did you move to Nashville like looking to do the proverbial music thing, or
yeah, I did. Here? I had been working on a project with a guy named Jimmy Knowles, who was in a band called Sea Level in the 70s. And Sea Level was kind of the first Allman Brothers Band side project offshoot. It was Chuck Leavell, hence the name Sea Level, and J-Mo and Lamar Williams and Jimmy. And it was, around the time of like all the jazz fusion stuff and, Weather Report and all that was happening. And so it was definitely more focused on like the soul and funk and those sort of big band influence instrumentals that Dickie and Chuck were so amazing at writing. And so Jimmy and my ex-wife's father were like best buds and grew up together in DC and went to high school together and all that. And he had Parkinson's, and they would have these benefits for him at 3rd and Lindsley, and like everybody would come and participate. Gary Nicholson and Guthrie Trapp and Pat Bergeson and Dave Pomeroy and like all of that sort of that crew of 90s country, southern rock, and session dudes, who are, if you ever were at the tap room back during that time in the early 2010s, you'd go see them play and just be like, man, I got to practice.
I love that Guthrie Trapp trio.
Oh yeah. That Guthrie and Pomeroy and Pat Bergeson, the Treburga Palm, like going to watch that was just like, oh my God, mind blowing. But anyway, Jimmy, we came down for one of those benefits, and Jimmy and I like really hit it off. And, I came back through, and this is like, I guess, summer of 2005, to go to Bonnaroo. And on the way back from Bonnaroo, we stopped at Jimmy's house in Antioch and like did a bunch of demos. And then I started coming down here throughout most of 2006 to work on this record with Jimmy. And he like got all of his buddies to be on it. I mean, I got to do a duet with Bonnie Bramlett, and Jack Pearson's all over it, and and Dave Pomeroy basically produced it. And there's just like all of these guys that like I didn't even know it at the time, but whose music had like their playing and their and the records they played on and all that had influenced me and touched me so much. And that was kind of my first foray into just being down here at all. And then after the sessions, Jimmy's Parkinson's started to get a lot worse, and it became real apparent that the mixing and the post-production process was probably not gonna shake down on a tight timeline unless I was down here to help. And so my girlfriend at the time and I decided we were gonna come down here probably, for a few months for the summer in 2007 and get that done and see how we liked it. And then, probably go back to Richmond after that. And then, 18 years later, here I am.
Yeah. I mean, I also am like, well, what took you so long? You were young and free, and Richmond's not too far away, and you had something going on in Nashville too. So that's like a pretty good reason to come.
Yeah. It was,
you were how old?
It wasn't hard to convince me. I was 23 24 when I started coming down.
Yeah.
25, 26 when I moved here.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect age to be here.
So, at what point? Let me see if I can articulate this. I don't know if I can very well. I think that a lot of people move here with stars in their eyes or some version of that, and whether or not they know how to make that happen, they hang on, and then maybe they sort of trickle off one side or another. God forbid some go into real estate, or maybe some go into management, or what I mean. Did you have an experience where you were like, did you think you were going to, be an art? And I mean, you are an artist, but like the version of signed touring guy to being a person in a community. I don't know if I'm not putting this very well.
I mean, I think I kind of know what you're saying.
I'm describing maybe my own experience in a certain way. I'm like, I'm a guy that lives in East Nashville. I'm part of this community. I have, my creative things that I'm doing all the time. And I like that evolved and that developed kind of as I lived here and was like finding my way. And so I guess that's my, how did you find yourself to be where you're at in kind of this unusual, to me, an unusual position in East Nash, where you're sort of like one of the ringleaders of sorts, like a community ringleader. That's how I see you. Fair assessment?
I mean, I don't know if I would. Whenever people say that, it makes me feel real good. Good. It's really flattering, but I don't. It's hard for me to kind of take a step back from the reality of like the things I haven't made work, the things that I, neglected until I was, in my 40s, that, like all of that stuff. It's like when people say that, I'm like, yeah, but I don't think I've done anything yet. You know what I mean? But I know that's, not entirely true, but I don't know. So I didn't come here with an expectation of like, oh, this record, I'm going to do this record and it's going to do it for me. And and all of that. When you're that age, you're lucky enough to be like, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm just going to do this and we'll see what happens and where it goes. I do think that I came down here, especially given somebody that was like, given that I was working with somebody that was like kind of a pioneer of the jam band world, but not the same as the actual Almonds or whatever, that I kind of figured I would be doing what I'm actually doing now. But which is making psychedelic Southern rock and performing it and adding to that tradition, but when I got here in 2007, that wasn't an acceptable thing to do here.
Yeah.
There was not the glut of Grateful Dead cover bands. There was not the
Moon Taxi hadn't taken off yet.
They were still living in that house on 12 South, like all together, and they were just starting to be a thing. But even them, that stage in the game, if there was a band doing anything resembling that, they were a frat band.
Yeah.
There was not like your option of having a real career by all Nashville standards, like didn't really exist. Like the Billy Strings thing he was still in elementary school at that point. All of that, Marcus King was still in elementary school, like all that whole thing didn't exist yet. And you were really kind of looked at as like a hippie nerd who didn't know what they were doing if you talked too much about that. Unless you talked about the Allman Brothers. But even then, it was still iffy. If you started getting into the improv aspect of them, no one wanted to hear it. So, of course, being really young and not really having a good grasp on, anything, but like, I immediately was like, well, shit, must pivot, must cut hair, grab the vest, have the acoustic and try and do some sort of version of the stomp clap folk revival thing, which I was so terrible at. And I will like look back at like my old records and like old YouTubes and stuff and like look at this guy and I'm just be like, what on earth was I thinking? Why did I think I could do that? So I wasted a lot of time doing that.
I mean, did you enjoy it though?
I mean, I enjoy making music with my friends.
Yeah.
And I enjoy performing for audiences and, you know, and I had to learn how to write somehow. So, you know, I don't really look back on a lot of the like identity crisis stuff or wasted time or like any of that with too much regret, you know. I'm still fairly young and now the city and the industry and all that stuff has come around to what I do, you know, thanks to Gilliam Welch and Dave Rawlings, and thanks to Billy Strings, and thanks to Marcus King. But before that, you know, thanks to Chris Robinson Brotherhood and to, you know, Todd Snider and the Hardworking Americans, and, you know, those two bands specifically, because it's like, oh, you know, you can be a new jam band that's also like literate and adding to the folk canon, and you don't have to break out the EDM tools and the computers if you don't want to. You can just like still do it with instruments and, you know, solid writing. And so like now, you know, once it became acceptable to do what I've always wanted to do since I was a little kid, I did it. And, you know, and ever since then it's worked out pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of times people who find their way, you know, really early on, it's a blessing and a curse. You know, the blessing side of it's like maybe it accelerates your visibility or your financial solvency or whatever that thing is that we think that we want. But I think the challenge then is that you all of a sudden there's expectations around you. There's a team. There's a fan base that wants to hear what that made them like you in the first place. And with all of that becomes there's some fetters, you know, on your ability to grow or mature. It's like it's a little harder. You kind of got to buck against things. I've watched this happen with people who tried to do different things and they're like, nope, I guess I'll just be this thing that you know me to be.
No, I have too, and I think we're all guilty of it when we, you know, one of our favorite artists makes a shift that we weren't expecting them to make, and, you know, and there's that tinge of like, I don't know how I feel about this, and, you know, that kind of stuff. Like you know, it's like that, the Bob Dylan line, like when you got nothing to lose. So it's like, I'm honestly really grateful that like, I didn't have my shit together and that I was able to kind of skin my knees without it upsetting anything in the scheme of things. But like, there's no, you know, there weren't any fans to turn their back on me. So, you know, like they're like, I didn't disappoint anyone, or I didn't, you know,
there's a great deal of creative freedom in toiling in obscurity.
Yeah.
You know
100%. I mean? Like, you know, because then at that point, like, your triumphs are, you know, a lot better celebrated, and, you know, your tragedies, like, nobody noticed.
Knows.
So who cares?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like these days in my lulls and slumps and woebegone moments, I take heart in my conviction that really nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention to me. And if they are, it's in a fleeting way. It's a swipe. It's a scroll. And
right.
That is not a sad feeling. That is like a reassuring feeling for me. I'm like, oh yeah, nobody fucking cares. I just try it. If it doesn't work, and like I do shit all the time that doesn't work, or only sort of works. I do a lot of things that like sort of work. One thing in 50 is like, oh, okay, that maybe it kind of worked a little bit better. Right. But it's just like really nice to know that in a way that I think that's one of the things that like kids have a hard time getting over at the beginning, because your classmates, or you're surrounded by them, maybe you grew up with them. They're just like, oh my God, what's everybody going to think? And when you're young or in a small town and you have like a small social group, that is a pretty powerful influence. But to me, one of the best things about moving to Nashville, which I did when I was 30 and was almost 20 years ago, was the anonymity of it and the competitiveness of it, where everybody moved here to be successful and be, visible, right, and accelerate their career. And it was kind of like anything goes in a way. If you can just get attention, then yay, that's a win of sorts. Mm-hmm. And so that was really nice. I felt like before I moved here, I was always kind of like apologizing for my ambition. Because you know what I mean? Like, who the fuck do you think you are, Lenker? And
totally.
I was an idiot, granted, but moving here.
Totally. And I would even say that a lot of that first 3 years, that period before I moved here to this part of town, a lot of that like sort of identity crisis and stuff that I was kind of talking about was an extension of that, like of that sort of outlook on things that I had since I was in my teens and since I was just starting to figure out how to do this and decide if I wanted to.
Let me ask you this, like, why did you want to do this in the first place? Before Nashville, before anything happened, like, what was it that made you want to get up in front of people and share music that you made up?
100% to heal. For the same reasons that like Marvin Gaye got into it, for the same reasons that, Jerry Garcia got into it, for like to heal.
I read somewhere that you kind of had rough, like, coming up.
Yeah. There's my mom's side of the family, especially, like, there's a long history of mental illness. I lost her to mental illness in 2007, about a month before I moved here. And her father, who also kind of, helped to raise me after my parents got divorced, I lost him to mental illness in 1992 when I was 11. And so for me, I was young, like probably like 5, 6, like when my parents were going through the divorce. And I would say the first like thing that let me see that that's what this does, and that's how you can do, like how you can help people to not feel alone, and to understand that we're all in this together, and that everything must pass and all of that. Like the first realization I had of that, I was probably like 6, and I'll never forget it. My father had come to pick me up for a like every other weekend visitation, however they had set it, the courts had set it up. And he had just come back from Richmond the weekend before, where he had seen Steve Earle on the Guitar Town tour. And he was just like, could not stop talking about this show. And he was just like on and on and on and on and on. He had the tape. He had Guitar Town, and he put it in, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I just like that, oh my God, like that guitar on the intro at the top of the record, just, hey, pretty baby, are you ready for me? It's your good rockin' daddy down from Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And so I was just hooked anyway, because it was just like, this is the coolest thing ever, but then I remember like watching, we're just driving around and talking and catching up, and my little brother's asleep in the back, and, watching my dad react to this music. And then it gets towards the end of the record, and Little Rock and Roller comes on, and it's like the song that Steve wrote for Justin when Justin and I are about 6 months apart. And so and he's got to be away from him because he's on the road and all of that. It's that type of tune. And I just remember like seeing like my dad crying and seeing how much that touched him, and just like immediately at that young being like, there's probably nothing else in the world that I could do to be able to do this for other people besides this job, you know, because when you're 6, you don't, even if you're going through family stuff and you've got a family therapist, you don't look at your therapist and you'd be like, that looks like the coolest job in the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, you don't look at, you know, unless you're like in a police officer family or a teacher family, you don't look at those kind of, and be like, that looks so rad, you know, in that day and time. And then, you know, the TNN and MTV heyday, when you could see the video, and like Steve Earle looked like the coolest man in the universe, but he also just like a regular old dude. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can 100% do this job. Mm-hmm. And so I just it always sat in the back of my mind as like, that's what music is for. And if I ever get the chance or get good enough to be able to make it, that's the kind of music I want to make, is music that, you know, helps people. Were they musical at all? Your family, your dad? My mom's youngest sister, went to music school, is a music therapist, lived in Nashville for a bunch of years. And she was kind of like my first guitar teacher, my first vocal teacher, and all of that. My little brother, who does commercial real estate, is a killer bass player. But hey, he probably hasn't performed since we were in high school, you know? And that's it. It's just
so it wasn't like
it's just the three of us.
Guitars hanging on the wall growing up or anything.
No,
like that.
No, it was just the three of us. Like, I think my dad's dad, my grandfather on my dad's side, bought me my first like real playable guitar, and there was, you know, a guy up the street that taught lessons. But this would have been like, you know, 91, 92, 93. So it was, you know, I want to learn how to do like what Kurt Cobain does and what Steve Earle does and you know, heroin. No, I wanted to learn how to like make that kind of art. And this guy's got the Floyd Rose Kramer with, you know, like the George Lynch model and doing the 2-hand tapping. And he's like really bummed that all I want is my 3-bar chords and to get out.
Aim higher, son.
You know, and, but now, like looking back, especially that I'm playing more improvisational music, I'm like, I really wish I'd have fucking paid attention to that guy.
I wonder if we could talk about Todd for a second.
Yeah.
You hung out with him a lot, and I love that connection to the Purple Building and how you ended up getting to make the Lady Couch record there. And I have a huge connection to that building too. This is like 08, 9, 10.
Oh, when it was still the co-op.
The co-op, the community co-op. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mo's son, a guy named Mo's son. Another East Nashville fixture. I always called it the Mo's Son Palace because it just felt like his domain. And he always tried to tell people he owned it, and he never did. He kind of just rented it from somebody. It was never clear what was going on there, which is perfect. But yeah, man, I met the guy. This piano in this room right here is. Is
that one of the uprights from there?
No, but the guy that gave it to me is a savant from Mississippi named Lucas Lee, and he lived here for a long time in town. I met him at the Purple Building just in a spontaneous jam one night, and we ended up being like best friends. He was in my band forever. I was there when his first kid was born, and on and on. But that was like that night started at that Purple Building. I put shows on there. I remember having a 5-spot show that got canceled at the last second. Mm-hmm. We just put it around the corner and had a great night. I remember
doing a couple of like unofficial Americana Week showcases there, like put together.
That room's enchanted.
BYOB stuff with like us and Don Gallardo and
Don Gallardo.
Yeah,
shout out.
Little rejection letter commiseration parties. You know?
No, that was what was so cool about that place. It couldn't have been more centrally located, 5 Points. And because it wasn't like really public, or was it, or was kind of not, you could just sort of like, it was a lot freer of a venue, let's say.
Yeah, you could do literally anything there, you know.
That was really great. But how did you end up meeting Todd, and just whatever, you know, you want to share, or what comes to mind that's sparkles?
Oh man. So I was doing my best friend Lauren Spratlin, Larry, was working for Elizabeth Cook in like starting around 2014 or so. She was tour managing for her and doing a lot of work with her, and you know, Elizabeth and Todd were really, really close. And so I kind of fell in with Elizabeth and that crew sort of that way. But, you know, at that point, Todd was up in Hendersonville. He wasn't like down here as, you know, as frequently as whatever. So like, I never really, you know, I was a huge fan of Hardworking Americans. I fucking adored them. And I remember, you know, right before the summer I was moved down here, the video that Stacey Huckabee directed, shout out to Stacey, for Looking for a Job, had just, you know, was really popular that summer and all that. Like, but I didn't know a ton about him, you know, and we'd never met. And then April of 2016, Mike Grimes had let me put a band together to do a Black Crowes tribute for the East Nashville Beer Fest. And I get a call like the day of the show from Grimey, and he's like, "Hey man, there is a special guest that wants to sing a song with you, and you know, I feel like you should let him do it." And I'm like, "Well, who is it?" And he's like, "It's Todd Snider." And I was like, "Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What does he want to sing? How much does he want to sing?" And he's like, "I don't know, man. He just like emailed me and said he would be down there and to tell you." And I was like,
sounds about right.
Okay, cool. And I get down there and he's like waiting for us by the stage. It's just him and the one production guy, you know, who's like doing the lights, the sound, probably built the stage himself, you know. And it's cold as shit, and Todd's barefoot, but with a sweater on, you know, and his hat, and you know, so I go up and introduce myself, and he's, you know, just as kind as can be, and he's like, "Oh, Elizabeth's told me a bunch about you, man." And he's like, and when I found out you were doing this, I was like, I had to come down. He's like, "I even emailed Chris and told him." I'm like, what'd you do that for? Don't you know? You know? I'm like, oh, great. Okay, so now Chris Robinson knows that I'm going to do this really poor impression of him in front of, you know, hundreds of people.
That sounds like something he would do.
Yeah, oh, totally.
I gotta tell Chris.
Yeah, why?
This guy's going to be playing your music.
Well, and then later, we all went to like a CRB show, and we're backstage, and like, Chris sees my Grateful Dead tattoo, and he's kind of giving me a hard time. And Todd steps in and is like, "That's the kid I was telling you about." Like, he's doing me a favor. I'm like, "I think you're about to make it worse, man." You know, but so he got up there and he sang with us, and you know, and I remember he immediately asked to see the set list, and I showed it to him, and we had a bunch of like deep cuts from Amorica and not very many hits, and he thought that was just cool as shit, you know. He was like, "Dude, right on." And I was like, "Man, you know, like, I want to sing what I want to sing. Like, everyone's gonna know what the music is. It doesn't have to be the hits." And he was like, "Exactly." And I was like, cool. I'm glad that he gets it, you know. And he sang Remedy, and he killed it, and it was really fun to watch. And I just remember watching him watch us and watching me do these songs, and him just like, you know, grooving and dancing and singing along, and it meant the absolute world to me. And if our relationship had ended right there that day, like, I would, still tell this story with as much joy and as much pride and everything as I'm doing right now. But it didn't, it didn't at all. And he just kind of kept reaching out either on his own or through Liz. And I ended up getting to do, the Bulldog. I went from being a backup singer in the Bulldogs to being the bass player in the Bulldogs. My only endorsement, or my first endorsement that I ever had, was with Fender, and it was because I didn't own a bass to be in the Bulldogs. And so Ben Blankdemont,
made a call.
Yeah. and hooked me up with it. And then I got to actually be the guitar player in the Bulldogs. It was me and Latham for like that last couple of Bulldogs shows. And then Todd took me out solo, which, as I said earlier, was not good at, and still don't think that I'm good at being a folk singer, in terms of being able to do that thing that like that John Prine and Aaron Lee and Arlo Guthrie and Todd do, where you can, tell the stories and you have a really good grasp on your acoustic playing and all of that. Like I don't feel like I'm very competent at that. People come see it and they buy stuff afterwards. So like
Todd Snider took you out.
But I don't feel as, whatever about it. But he took me out a bunch, and that whole time that he was taking me out, he knew that I wanted to be doing something else, and he knew that I was a jam band kid, and that I was a Southern rock kid, and all of that. And he just kept kind of being like, why aren't you doing that? And the reason I wasn't doing it was because everyone else was telling me that like it wasn't going to work because, no one wanted it, and that it was going to be, no one wanted to invest in it, and that I would lose money, and that it wouldn't work. And I was telling myself that a lot. But I mean, when I say everyone, I don't mean just like industry people, although that was obvious. But I mean, like, people in the band were saying that this won't work, and
you're taking it from all sides, man.
And I just knew that like wasn't true. And then it would continue to be confirmed for me, every 4 or 5 months, as Sturgill and Margot and all of these friends who allowed themselves to do that had all of this success. And other friends who pivoted to that would begin to have more success. And so I'm just, and Todd and them, the hard working was doing great. And at that point still, and all of that. And I was just like, I got to tell you guys, man, I really think that this would work. Like if we're doing something that showcases us, all of us, in our best light, and, creates this big, beautiful sense of community and all of that, like, I think it would work. And Todd was like, you have to start doing this. And, he would show me all sorts of albums, and, we'd look at live stuff on YouTube from like different bands and everything. And he would be like, this, you can do this, you can do that. I'd come off stage after like trying so hard to do my best, like keep up with like Todd and Aaron Lee and Darren and stuff, and just failing fucking miserably, and he would be so sweet. He'd be like, Alan, when you walk on there with a guitar, like it's like Garcia or like Trey Anastasio, like all you got to do is just walk up there with your guitar and people want to know what you're about to do. You don't have to tell stories. You don't have to tell jokes. You don't have to do this. And like now looking back, that was his very kind way of being like, dude, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're doing. But he managed to do it in a way that could pivot me to what I did know how to do. And and it worked, and it gave me the confidence and the encouragement that I needed to like really, make the plans and see it through and write for it and figure out how to promote it and figure out how to do it.
Was there a moment that kind of affirmed that, where you'd like felt like the world was finally meeting you where you were at?
Oh yeah.
Describe that to me.
100%. So we had done like a Music City Roots, and we had done a couple other things, but Lady Couch hadn't played very much. But the whole time I knew, like as soon as Keisha and I started telling people that we were starting a band together, and as soon as I started telling certain people that like, I'd been talking to Snider and I'd come up with this idea for this big sort of, hippie orchestra, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Little Feat type thing, the reactions just from that were far different than when it was like, oh, I've got a new Alan Thompson record coming out, and it'd be like, great, 2 IPAs, please. Yeah. Like people's eyes would just get wider, and they would be, their whole demeanor would change as I would, be telling them about this thing. So that was really a good indicator that it was like, okay, I'm on to something here. And then I booked an after party at Acme. It was after like it was like Labor Day weekend, on the Sunday. It was at the end of the run, or maybe it was on the Monday on Labor Day. Anyway, it was at the end of that run, and we were the after party at Acme. And I went over to the show after, dropping all my stuff off, and went to go for first set, and strangers were like stopping me all throughout the lawn at Ascend and be like, we're coming across the street. We're coming across the street. And, and I was like, oh, cool, great. What the fuck is going on? And, and we got there, and it was just like, as soon as from the second we walked on stage, like the place was completely packed. Todd had come, and he brought like Steve Poltz and all of these other people. All these Todd fans were there. All these Widespread fans were there. And, it was just full. It was full from the beginning, and everyone was singing along, even to these like brand new originals that hadn't even been recorded yet. And I remember the exact moment that I knew it would work, because we did that first 3 songs on that Robert Palmer record, Sneakin' Sally, so it's just like Sailing Shoes, straight into Hey Julia, straight into Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. And I remember going into Sailing Shoes, and the band, we did a great job, and everybody's like, yeah. And then as soon as like the beat drops and that bass line for Hey Julia stops, you could see, all of these light bulbs going off over the heads of like everybody in the audience, and they're like, oh, they're about to do it. They're going to do that whole thing. And people high-fiving each other. And and Keisha looked at me, and she was just like, how did you know? And I was like, because this is exactly how I would have acted if I saw somebody do this. And she was just like, God damn. And sure. And by the time we got to Sneakin' Sally, I mean, people were going back outside, finding the nitrous guy, getting balloons and bringing them back in to Acme. And I was like, all right, we're good. Yeah. So I knew from the beginning, like, as long as we stayed true to that, and our goal and our message was to, like I've been saying the whole time, like, to bring people together and to show them this. And as long as our shows had real dynamics and like they were real shows, we'd be fine, and every time that we've stayed on that path, as hard as it is to do, good things would happen immediately. And every time we've strayed from that path, the opposite would happen immediately, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And I owe 100% of that to Todd Snider. You know, he really, you know, him being in a jam band at that same time and all of that, like, and him kind of really just learning how to do it, aside from having been a fan for forever, at the same time, was invaluable to me, because he would immediately teach me everything that he had been learning over the course of that last 4 years, you know, and all the stuff he'd been observing in the 20-some prior to that. And so I got a real amazing sort of secondhand, you know, crash course in how to really do it from him. And, you know, and to see what kind of frontman I could be and what kind of frontman I should be. And, man, I adore him.
I'm really glad to hear this story. I feel like a lot of people don't get to hear the mentor side of Todd Snider, because, you know, so many people are fans. They just see the stage side. So, invaluable perspective, man. Maybe that's a good moment to tee up perhaps a live song here at the studio.
Oh, dude, 100%. I would love that.
And do you want to set it up, the song? And
yeah, so this is a song called "Foolish and Blue." It's the first single that Lady Couch released with Cafe Rooster Records, and yeah, it's traditionally a duet with me and Keisha, but I thought it would be really fun for this environment to do it kind of like that, like Jimmy Rogers and Louis Armstrong style. So it's going to be Ben Klassen on trumpet and me on guitar.
Let it rip.
One more night in this room all alone, I'm writing a novel to you on my phone. Fiction feels better right now than the truth. It keeps me from feeling foolish and blue. Now we haven't known each other too long. How can you be certain what we're doing is wrong? When I said I loved you, I believed it was true. So why am I feeling foolish and blue? Foolish and blue. Foolish and blue. Afraid to sleep, 'cause our dreams may come true. Let's take a chance on love that is new, one that won't leave us foolish and blue. Everyone walks through life with regret. Mistakes they are made, bad things they are said. Well, I know I regret it, my life without you. I'd always be foolish and blue.
That was fantastic, and I would not have called the horn, but I think that's a first here for the studio. And man, thank you for sharing.
Oh man, that was fun.
It looks like you have a notebook there. I feel like maybe there's something that is in it that needs to be said.
Oh, well, when I knew I was coming in, I made sure to take notes, just because I knew there was going to be things that I didn't want to not say, but I would definitely forget if I hadn't written them down. I feel like we talked about a lot of it, but one of the things that, like Snider really showed me and showed everybody, I think, that he came into contact with, was that you don't have to, if you're worried about playing the game, and if you're worried about figuring out how to take this intangible thing and turn it into a tangible commodity, like, you're never going to be happy, and you're never going to be able to resonate. I can only do that if I'm being 100% true to myself, and I'm creating art that creates joy inside of me, and I'm creating art that allows me to have the catharsis of, singing or writing or playing about this traumatic experience or this joyful experience or this, and then putting on a show where all of that is in there, where you see that just like the life we have to get up and live every day, that there is, intense trauma and severe pain. And there is also unspeakably amazing joy. And they're in the smallest things that happen to us and that we see every day, and in the largest things that happen to us and that we see every day. And it's like, Todd really confirmed for me that sort of the only way to do that, or to have, forever fans, and to be able to sustain yourself emotionally and financially, like, throughout your career, is to ignore, or sometimes bitterly refuse to listen to, anyone that tells you that doing this way is not going to get you where you need to go. And, and playing the game and doing the press and doing the whatever, that's one thing. Like, you obviously want people to know what you're doing, but that's the point. I want them to know what I'm doing. I don't want them to compare me to someone who doesn't do this for those reasons, because I'm never going to look the same as that person. And I'm never going to, and ultimately I don't want that person's fans at my shows. Like, I want people that are there to be a part of this with me, not people that are there for me to lie to them about whatever. Like, there's plenty of that all over your phone and all over your television and all over every building you walk into to do business every day of your life. I'm here to take you away from that and remind you that there are other ways for you to live your life.
Yeah. I think that if there's a through line for the most of the artists that or have been on this podcast, it's some spirit of the thing that you're describing, which is a person kind of honoring a calling inside themselves, sort of against their own better judgment or with the wise counsel of their parents or the industry's dictates, and instead like listening to this still small, sometimes insane voice and honoring it, putting it first and accepting the consequences. And I feel like, Todd Snider is emblematic of that.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a one of one for that reason.
100%.
No one was more himself than that man.
Without question. Without question.
And so that makes a lot of sense that you're, just everything you just said and why you're here right now, and why even though I haven't seen you in a musical setting in probably 17 years, I'm going to say, because not since you might not even remember, but I can't remember if I put it on. Somebody put on some show at the upstairs theater at the Bongo.
It was like you and me and like, was it Mike and Ben Ford?
Maybe. I mean, I can't even remember anyone but you.
Yeah,
there.
I know. I remember.
But there was several people. It was like one after another. We did something. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I can see it clear as day. I think Larissa Maestro might have been on it as a solo, not with like one of her bands. Which would make perfect sense because she and I were working at PM next door to Bongo at that time.
It was an era. But
God, yeah.
I mean, like my point is this: is that I've known of you. We've traveled in kind of parallel universes, but in the same way, I've been like in fervent pursuit of my own thing, like
right.
Despite, and never really figured out how to square it with the industry. And like at some point along the way, just was like, fuck it, I don't even know. But I've had a career doing it. And more importantly, I like woke up pretty much every day and had an opportunity, at least some opportunity to express myself in sometimes bold, sometimes uncertain, sometimes terribly ineffective, creative way.
Right.
And so I feel like I'm hearing an echo of that story in your own story.
I would say from watching you over the course of this last, 15 years too, it's like, because I'd always been a big fan of your music, and every time we'd run into each other, it's always really good conversations, but we didn't run in the same circles that often to where we would watch each other grow up on social media, but not necessarily together.
Yeah.
But every new thing that you were doing or new, chapter of your life that you were starting, like it always looked impossibly cool. And you always looked like you were, really enjoying yourself when a lot of times you probably weren't. And it's definitely been really inspiring to like watch you figure out how to walk the tightrope between art and commerce and, be able to take good care of yourself financially and everything else, but also, getting returns on the emotional and political capital, social capital that you've invested as well, for lack of a better term. And it's like, I definitely have taken notes as I've watched us both grow up,
Well,
because I cannot say that I've been smart enough to be able to do the same for myself,
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about before we part ways is I feel like I read somewhere that you got sober maybe a year or two ago. Is that fair to say?
I quit drinking in October of 22, so I quit drinking 3 years ago.
I mean, I just want to ask the obvious question, but I think it's an interesting one, nonetheless, because this will be the first time I've said this, publicly, but I do want to like say that, like I do still use THC, and I don't think I'll probably ever quit psychedelics. Let me just write that down. I'll update my file.
But like, I just feel bad when, and it's like, especially like folks at the meetings I no longer attended or whatever. Like the last thing I want to do is be on a platform telling people that I am 100% sober and, you know, X, Y, and Z, when that's not exactly the case. You know, I will also add the caveat that I did spend a lot of time in the rooms, and that I spent a lot of time doing trauma therapy, and, you know, still go to my therapist every 2 weeks. And I would not have been able to do any of that work if I had continued to drink and use drugs and have the relationship with all of the substances the way I did. And I'm, you know, 100% grateful for all that. But I do feel like it's my responsibility to be like, hey, look, I'm, you know.
Yeah. I think that's an honorable thing to express. And with regards to the drinking, is it hard to be at a show like this weekend or last weekend, depending on when this airs, where everyone's partying? And is there still some small thing, or is it kind of behind you now, or you put it away, or you just blow a J and it's cool?
I mean, well, that's kind of the thing with, you know, with pot and other psychedelics. Like, you know that there's only a certain amount you can do if you have to work, before the point of diminishing returns comes hard. You know, and then it's a real drag to be up there and be frightened and not want to do what you know, you're supposed to do. Which is obviously very different than like cocaine and alcohol, where you're like, you can do way more than any human should and think you are about to deliver the best performance of everyone's lifetime. And, you know, you see that happen pretty quite a bit. And so, like, for me, it's like, I remember all of the last waltzes, all of the nights at the 5 Spot, all of the times that I've been on stage when I shouldn't have. And so it's really easy for me to not really worry about what I'm doing backstage.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm about to deliver a performance that's better than any of those, you know. And I think I was lucky too. Like, I did an outpatient situation when I quit drinking, and Lady Couch was like just starting to get fairly busy. And it was before we had an agent. So I was also doing all of that. So like, I wasn't afforded the luxury of having, like, you know, 2-3 months where I was away from the community at large. And then I came back, you know, I was having to book shows. I was having to do shows. I mean, I was like 3rd week in, still going to the outpatient center, and had a show at D's, you know, and then had a show at Brooklyn Bowl.
Like, I'm curious about
and
those,
then had a weekend run, you know, like,
yeah. What about that? Like, the show at D's would be a perfect example of just like, fuck, man, this is like all of the environment is there.
So the lead up to the performance sucked, and I was scared and angry,
kind of not
nervous.
looking forward to it in a
and
fucked
then
up way.
I opened my mouth to sing the first song, and heard my voice coming back like clear and in line with what, you know, my ear was telling my throat to do, and strong. So, and in a way that I always knew that I could sing, but, you know, would spend a lot of time blaming FOHs and monitor guys and band members and, you know, anyone but myself for me not being able to. And then all of a sudden I was doing it effortlessly because I was too scared to prepare. And then that was kind of, you know, like I was saying before, like at that point, I don't give a shit what I'm doing with my hands before the gig. I don't, you know, if I don't want to talk to anybody, I can walk away. But like, I'm not going to lose that, my ability to do that. You know, I'm always pretty self-deprecating and don't really feel like when people give me a lot of compliments and stuff, I really will, kind of shut down and shy away from it because, I don't necessarily, when you're in your own life and having to parse through every bit of your own career in order to, plan for your next thing or promote your next thing or whatever, it's really hard to see that and take other people saying it as true. But that was a moment where I was like, holy shit, if I can sing that well just because I stopped doing this, then I'll never go back.
That's a bargain I can make.
Ever. And if you'd have told me how good I would sound just by doing that, I would have, done it years prior. But
I mean, that's what's so great about growing is that it's never too late.
Yeah.
You can always be like, well, I wish it had happened 10 years ago, but it didn't. Who cares?
But honestly, like, I feel really, really great about where I'm at. I feel really great about where I'm at as a person and, as a partner to my girlfriend and as a friend and as an artist, as a writer, as a guitar player, as a singer, like, and I honestly don't think that I would have gotten to a place where I was where I'm at. And, in terms of how I view myself, my self-esteem, and the job I do. Like, I don't think that if I had success earlier on, if I had, been on this wave of a bunch of people getting signed and moving up the ladder, or been on the next one, or been on the one before those two, or whatever, I don't even know if I'd be here to talk to you right now, to be perfectly honest. I don't think I could have handled it. I don't think I could have, I don't think I would have survived it because I wasn't ready. And that's why I didn't get to work. It's like I can have the chip on my shoulder and let it get bigger and bigger as much as I want. But at the end of the day, like, I wasn't ready. My work, my personality, my attitude, my abilities, like, none of it was up to a level that should have allowed me to get there. And I couldn't have gotten to a place where now I do feel like I am deserving of the things that have come my way and that I'm planned for. But I couldn't have gotten to that place without having gone through all of that bullshit that got me here.
I see before me a man in full. Man, it's just great to sit across the table and hear somebody describe their own present and current piece. And I'm just really grateful for you for spending the time to talk with me a little bit.
Oh man, I'm so grateful for you for having me. This has been.
We could have gotten coffee, but we might as well just put some lights up and talk to the microphones.
No, that's awesome. I'm thank you so much for having me over.
My dude, I can't wait to see you again.
Yeah.
Peace.
All right.
The Morse Code Podcast is produced by Korby Lenker and Jared Hammond in East Nashville, Tennessee. Our executive producer is Randa Newman. You can find full videos for this and all previous episodes at morsecodepodcast.com.